Yeah.
So I mean, this is a really informal conversation. I've got several things that I'd love to talk about. I know you're passionate about some things, but I know we are both a member at a club that's a golf club, and I'm really myself looking forward to playing here. It's been a long winter.
Yeah, I know. Did you get out the last couple of days at all?
I've been to the driving range a couple times in the last couple of weeks, but I've been so busy trying to do work on the podcast, and normal life stuff,
Exactly.
Chasing our kids around in sports and all that stuff. So not as much as I'd like.
Yeah.
But do you do the Dunhill Cup?
Oh yeah, love it.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite events all year.
Yeah. When do we get signed up for that pretty soon, I guess.
I think so. Yeah, they just sent the word out.
Yeah.
So anyway, so for me, I told you a little bit about it before we went on camera here. Basically, this effort for me started about 3 years ago. When COVID hit and everything shut down, a lot of businesses shut down. Your industry got affected greatly by it, and it really kind of took me out of. I've been kind of how do I call them? What I trying to kind of come up with a good name for what I am. Historically, I've always been I question everything. I'm very inquisitive. When I try to learn things, I try to learn them all the way through, and I want to get what's closest to the truth most of the time.
Yeah.
I'm not really big on right versus left politics. I don't like one side saying, well, it's this side's fault, or somebody else, and there's direct evidence on both sides. I don't really get into that. So, when COVID hit, I started having a regular conversation with a good friend of mine, and we created what I would consider a battle plan to fight against tyranny. And what I mean in tyranny, it can happen in many different industries. So I've been talking with Dr. Roy Arnold, who's a local practicing physician. We're about 8 episodes in, and we talk about all kinds of different topics from the vaccination. He's very pro-vaccination. I've historically been very pro-vaccination. But we talked a little bit before, and just like how, no one should be forced to do something to their own body, no matter what, because that's kind of the ultimate tyranny.
The ultimate violation.
It's the ultimate violation. So, something's hit. I still have young kids, and I hopefully will have grandkids someday. And, I'm right around 50 years old, and I've just kind of witnessed, and I always feel like I've had a very good bullshit meter. Meaning if I hear something, I'm just like, something doesn't quite sound right there.
Yeah.
But what I'm hoping to create for our kids and our grandkids and whatever is a space where we can all go in the middle, that is not owned by a corporation, it's not owned by a government, it's not owned by any potential tyrant who's trying to control a narrative. It's more of a platform where, let's say you and I wanted to assemble a team of the 20 top doctors and scientists and journalists who maybe got things mostly right over the last few years. Maybe they were the first to see different signals out there. I think most people, whenever COVID hit, we didn't really know what to expect. It was really scary. There was a lot of fear. There were people dying. So there was a lot of things going on. But pretty quickly, there started to be some kind of tyranny bell ringers out there that I started noticing who were saying, well, wait, not everything is quite exactly the way it's being portrayed in the media. Different things were coming out of Africa, coming out of Israel, we're coming out of all these different countries, and our apparatus, our media, and our big tech platforms basically just started censoring and deplatforming people if they weren't saying what the approved narrative was when it came to what COVID was, where it came from, and what any potential solutions were, whether it was taking a supplement plan, or if people were early adopters to the vaccine, that's what they wanted to do. You just didn't really have a choice. It was this way or no way. So the thing with me is, like, if we are thrown into that mechanism, into that process again, and another disease comes out, call it disease X, I really want the top 20 people who got things mostly right over the last few years, basically, meaning I don't expect them to be perfectly right. I'm not suggesting they don't get things wrong, but when they do get things wrong, maybe they're not tied to the outcome that much, and they'll just say, "Whoa, missed that one, got that one wrong. Here's how I would do it differently moving forward." Whereas for me in society, it doesn't seem like we really have a mechanism of truth seeking that we can really trust and go to. Like, I know a lot of people personally who just don't trust the media anymore. And that's a really scary, bad thing to be. A lot of people don't trust the government anymore, don't trust medical establishment anymore. I want to trust things. I mean, it's vital to our society to be able to trust what you're hearing. Otherwise you don't know what decision to make in the most important moments. And so the think tank concept basically is me and Dr. Roy Arnold, who kind of have been vetting out this whole concept, say, I've got 10 doctors that I want to put on this think tank. He's got 10 doctors, and we'll ask that think tank questions. Let's say a disease X comes through, and here's the things that they're seeing. I want them looking at all the different mechanisms that they looked at before and how they got things mostly right, and then helping us answer important questions for our health and our safety. Mm-hmm. Right. So I felt like that's the most anti-tyranny thing that you can get right now. It's like, I don't want to wait 3 years to know what's the best path to take right now. We need to know right now what the best path to take right now is. And so I wanted to kind of explain that to you just so you kind of know how I approach things. That's everything that I approach from any topic. I'm not tied to any topic. I'm not tied to any narrative or outcome. I simply want to hear people's expertise in the areas. I want to come to know why they have the feelings that they do, or the beliefs that they do, or the facts that they do. And then, if all that information goes into a central repository where we, the people, own it, then people that maybe question that, maybe somebody might disagree with something you and I have a conversation about today, they should be able to ask a question or provide a specific, here's why I think differently a little bit about this. And that should expand the conversation. It should make us better, or we can rule out that, whatever that thing was that they said, we can rule that out. Well, I know why you believe that way. I thought that way before, or here's the study that ruled that out, or, whatever it is. Right. And then all that information can be stored in an area that can't be censored and can't be removed or controlled by quarterly profits. Right. So that's generally the idea.
Yeah.
Right. And there's nothing out there like it, I don't think, that I've ever seen or heard. And I don't really know why, because it seems like with technology and artificial intelligence that we should get there pretty quick. But anyway, so I just wanted to open up. I know you're really passionate about some things, and some of the things you're passionate about, I actually happen to be super passionate about.
Yeah.
I believe there probably be a few things where we don't necessarily agree. I've been an early fan of Elon Musk. I know and I don't really care about Tesla. I mean, I don't have a dog in the fight there. But he's one of the people that I kind of look to as a tyranny bell ringer, at least to some aspects where he took a platform away from a broken system that was corrupted, that was censoring, that was doing all these things, and exposed a lot of things that I'm really just thankful for as a human on the planet. So I give him credit for that, and give him some leeway maybe in some other ways that we don't agree. But so let's just launch off there. Why don't you tell the audience, who maybe somebody has never seen you on video before, a little bit about yourself, maybe what your childhood was like, kind of why you ended up where you are today, and what gives you the beliefs that you have right now.
Well, I was born in '65. I think that's important because we saw Vietnam, and we saw a lot of things along the way. As very young kids, we were not expected to automatically believe in really anything at all. We were raised, if you were born when I was born, you were born pretty close to that. 75 or something?
72. Yeah, 72. We're just a few years ago.
But I think that we saw, the hippies and the, all the craziness, and we saw a lot of ideas. I mean, I remember my sister telling my parents that, when she got to college that she had I don't remember what the teacher taught. It had nothing to do with science. And he explained that cocaine was actually good for you, and that it shouldn't be illegal, and that it was not addictive. And she came home. This was a dinner table conversation. So I've seen a lot of different things go a lot of different directions. And I think my age group is I think everybody thinks their age group special. I think what makes our age group special is that we were encouraged from the very beginning to question everything, not to believe. You couldn't believe the liberals. You couldn't believe the conservatives. You couldn't believe that the church necessarily. You couldn't believe the people were anti-church.
Right.
It was like you have to create your own perception of what's actually going on around you, because almost everybody has some ulterior motive, whether whether they believe it's good or it's purely in self-interest.
Yeah, I've often wondered that. I think what you're describing is critical thinking.
Right. And we were encouraged.
Yeah, and I don't, I'm trying to think of the best way. I consider my kids to be critical thinkers now, and I don't know how I taught them that, except for maybe they see me questioning everything. I don't know if there's a better way of teaching kids that. You have to teach them the basic reading, writing. What do you think that came from? Why do you think that we were so unique in that window of time where we questioned everything?
Because we were inundated with all kinds of different beliefs and different ideas, because there was so much turmoil going on in the 60s and the 70s, and so many completely divergent ideas going on in the United States at the same time, that we had to make our own choices. We had to come up with what the answers were for ourselves. And the other thing was we didn't have helicopter parents. That wasn't a term back in those days.
We had the opposite of helicopter parents.
Street lights come on, come home for dinner.
Be home for dinner. Exactly right.
That's it.
Same.
If you hear the bell, there's a bell on the back porch. If you hear that bell, you better run home.
That's right.
Or you're going to miss dinner. And if you didn't sit down and eat your dinner, then you didn't eat your dinner.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like there were alternatives. You had your dinner.
And we didn't have cell phones. There was no way to connect with our families if we were at a lake a half mile or a mile away. That's what I grew up hunting and fishing. So I would get on my 10-speed and I would have whatever I needed, and I would go fishing for a full day and come back at dark.
And when you were 12 years old, if you grabbed a .22 out of the cabinet with a bunch of shells, nobody worried about it, because you were going to shoot squirrels or something. You weren't.
And you'd been taught how to shoot.
There were no ideas. There wasn't even an idea that you would do anything wrong. I remember, several of my friends, we didn't have a lot of guns in our house, but several of our friends had gun racks with guns and cabinets with rounds of ammunition. And there was never a worry. There was never even a thought that you were going to misuse those things in any way, shape, or form. And so that was a very different time to grow up. It was a much more innocent time. But at the same time, they talked to you about, don't go to the wrong house. If you see something wrong with an apple, when you don't take fruit from someone because there might be a razor blade in it. So, we were made aware that there were bad people in the world who wanted to do bad things just for their own amusement, not for really any gain for themselves.
Well, very true.
And so we were warned about, these people were out there, but we didn't know them. Nobody knew them. Nobody knew who they were. But just be careful if you
kind of like the Cold War.
Stranger danger.
We grew up in the Cold War too.
Yeah,
so
duck and cover.
We had a very similar thing. It's like
you're probably too young to have a duck and cover.
No.
Duck and cover very early
we had
school.
it. We would go into the hallway and get on our knees and cover our head, or get under if something happened.
Under a table.
Get under our desk.
Get under the desk for the duck and cover, and then the hallway was for if there was a tornado. And I always thought, well, there's a door on either end of the hallway. I'm pretty sure that the tornado would kind of pull at you a little.
I had a very. I don't remember what I was in elementary school. I remember, and I'm trying to think how it would have been. Maybe second grade or third grade.
Yeah.
So you would have been, a little older. You'd have been maybe in high school, but a really, really bad storm hit, and it was one of the famous ones. I think it might have hit people that are not near us, but hit near Risley's. I think it was the one that kind of hit right in there, and the old Risley's.
Yeah.
And they had put us in the hallway and had everything done. And like you said, both the doors blew out on either end, and everything was green and wind was blowing through.
Yeah.
People were freaking out. Like, this wasn't well thought out. And then they shoved us into like a closet.
Yeah.
It's like they jammed us in somewhere because there was stuff blowing through and everything. But yeah, we grew up so much differently. I mean, it really is. And I'm even me and my wife are a little guilty. It's like our kids are a little more sheltered.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, except for, we were inundated with things back then, but we didn't have 24/7 media and news. We didn't have text messages, and we didn't, when bad news happened or something was really negative, it kind of, you didn't really hear about it right away.
Right.
And now we're even more inundated.
Right.
Really, and we don't know what to do with that information, I don't think.
Yeah. And I think that, always in your entire life, you need critical thinking. And one of the things that really bothered me, you were talking about the COVID thing earlier, was when they came on TV and said, oh, you have to trust the science. Trust the science, and this is the science. And if you've heard anything else is the science, then, that's wrong. You have to trust the science. Don't trust yourself. Don't think critically, And that was very scary to hear that, because that's, when you talk about tyranny, that's the root of it. The root of it is trust your government, trust the science, trust what we present to you, and don't question it.
We're from the government, and we're here to help.
And if you question it, you could be punished, because we can't have people questioning, and we're at that point now. We're at a very different point politically than we've ever been in my lifetime. I don't know about before that, as far as people being punished for political opposition. It's pretty amazing when you consider it. A lot of people, what's happening to Trump, whether he's been a perfect choir boy or not, they obviously are having a very hard time finding anything really criminal, because they're punching around at all these non-criminal elements, trying to create a criminal element. And they're weaponizing the FBI, which the supreme commander of the FBI is the president of the United States. They're weaponizing the CIA, which the supreme commander of the CIA is the president of the United States. People are, well, why would the FBI invade his home just because he's opposing the president of the United States? It's like, well, they work for people don't really understand the awesome power of the executive branch. The fact that he's been able to get judges on board with him is also interesting, because typically, judges are supposed to be the judicial branch and aren't supposed to interact with the executive branch a lot. But political favors, et cetera. It's an amazing time. Not since Nixon have we really had a political situation where somebody, where a group has really gone after an individual. And you can think what you want to about Nixon as far as whether he deserved it or didn't deserve it, or I think that
small change compared to the things that politicians are doing today.
Now impeachment is like an annual event. It almost seems like, back then he was being impeached and he quit the job rather than put the nation through it. Now, Clinton and everybody along the way gets impeached. It's like just part of what happens.
Yeah. I'm not sure we've never really talked about politics in any way, shape, or form, nor do I know who you listen to, what different shows you like or whatever, but I'm paying a close attention to the people that haven't been afraid to say things like you just said, and I'm talking about national media types and even influencers who aren't media types, who kind of became journalists because, whether you like him or not, like a Joe Rogan type, he's not always right about things. He calls himself, he comes from the left. He says he's never voted for a Republican president before. And so I have found myself, I've always leaned right. I can say that pretty, and it's mostly, socially, I'm a very liberal person. I believe you can do whatever you want to do in your home as long as it doesn't affect anyone in my home. From a political standpoint, the fiscal side of it, I've always been much more conservative. And that's fleshing out. I think that's one of the things that you and I are going to get to. But what I've noticed and what I've really been paying attention to, I've been working on this project for the last few years, or over 2 years. And, people like Tucker Carlson were kind of flushed out of Fox News, and there's people that like him and don't like him. But, I can go back well before, because you talked about the president being the head of the CIA and the FBI. And I do agree with that. That is ultimately the buck stops there.
True.
But to me, there is a bigger force at work, and I don't know if it's the bureaucracy. There's one particular Tyranny flag waver that I've been paying attention to. His name is Brett Weinstein, and he has a Dark Horse podcast. And he calls this apparatus Goliath. And Goliath meaning kind of the system, the institutions, the bureaucracy, Washington that never leaves. Because you think about it now, whenever Trump first came into the spectrum, like he was thinking about running for politics, he's been talking about it for 20 years, right? Mm-hmm. And when he finally does run, he decides he's going to run as a Republican. We all know he's a populist. He's not really a Republican. He's been a Democrat all of his life. But he's got populist ideas now. Mm-hmm. And straight away, before Biden was anywhere in power, the apparatus, the Goliath, started attacking him. I mean, they clearly didn't. Republicans didn't want him in. Democrats didn't want him in. Judicial didn't want him in. They have thrown everything in the book at him from the very beginning. So I can't really blame necessarily Joe Biden. I have to look a little deeper. Like, that's kind of the journey that I'm on, is kind of looking a little deeper as to why decisions like this are made. But it's really kind of interesting how things get exposed, and the different conversations that are being had to talk about it. I listen to Tucker Carlson a lot, not because necessarily I think he gets everything right, but he tends to ask questions that I feel like nobody ever asks that need to be asked. And whether you believe the person that he's asking the question to or not, it's like he interviewed Putin. Mm-hmm. I don't have anything good to say about Putin. I would never defend him, but it's really interesting if we're getting into a war against Putin, or we're being proxied to get into a war against Putin, that we should at least have some understanding of where he's coming from. Whether he's lying through his teeth through everything he says or not, we should be able to use our common sense, what we were taught as kids, and use that to say, I don't really trust him, but I do understand these points here that he's making. How does that reflect back onto us? And that's just one small thing, but like the biggest thing that I've been paying close attention to, and one of the areas where I feel you and I might have a little bit of friction, is in the big push toward electric and like not just electric cars, but the changing of our grid and kind of the war on fossil fuel and all that stuff is a real problem for me. And it's a problem for me just because I've paid attention to global politics for a long time. I've paid attention to China for a very long time, and it feels like everything that we're doing right now is kind of putting us behind an 8 ball in some way. Like, we're making policy decisions without an infrastructure or a real plan to see the thing through. They just say, by 2030, we got to do all these different things. And yet we're all sitting around looking like, okay, where is one thing that I can look to and say, I trust that this is going to work. We can go double down, triple down, go heavier into that. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really scary to people. I mean, people don't, I think Americans want to evolve. We want to if we can help the climate in some way, shape, or form. We don't want to have runaway global warming. We don't want to destroy the planet with fossil fuels. But until you give us a better path and you prove it, we're going to be a little cynical, as it were. Yeah. And fossil fuels, whether anybody wants to agree with it or not, has created a level of stability, lack of poverty. I mean, human flourishing like never before globally. Let's just pull America out of this. Globally, the world is better than it's ever been, and it's largely because we're pulling an energy source out of the ground that's very stable, that can be stored very stably, that you can pull locally, you can store locally, and you can access it whenever you want. Mm-hmm. And that provides security. You can build ideas around that. You can build companies around that. You can build societies around that. And so I don't know where we go from this. I kind of took a real hard left turn, but I feel like the attacks on Trump are very much in line with this war, this climate thing that we're getting put through, and all the decisions we're making based on the climate is forcing all the other decisions. Then you got the medical stuff that all happened. I mean, it feels like we're kind of getting nailed from all different angles. If I were putting a battle plan together to destroy a country, it would look a lot like what we're kind of being put into, because you and I might agree on 99% of the things, and yet if we disagree on one thing, we're taught now in public things, you can't talk about it. He's a racist or he's a whatever because he doesn't agree with this particular thing, and you'll get lambasted for it. So I rambled a lot there, but I think this is a natural kind of lead into like whichever direction we want to go with it. We could talk about electric cars a little more, or how I feel like we're in a bad situation with China myself. I don't like it. I don't like being beholden to them in any way, shape, or form. Mm-hmm. I just don't. And go wherever you want to go with that. I don't. Okay. It wasn't even a good question. There wasn't a good question.
We started with Putin, and then we went to
I know.
electric cars.
I bounced a little
bit. Yeah. So if I go back to Putin,
we've been around the globe there real quick.
If I go back to Putin, Putin is in an awesome situation. He's technically, I believe, the richest man in the world. He has his own jets, his own army, he owns nuclear bombs. I mean, who gets that rich, right? So he's a very wealthy man, and he has very, very little chance. He knows how to operate in Russia. He has very, very little chance of losing his job. So once you have everything in the world and you can't lose your job, what is your motivation? Your motivation is either to improve the world or possibly, I believe in Putin's case, is to make Russia a better, stronger Russia. And I think in Putin's case, I don't personally think that he cares much about the world. I think he cares about Russia and making Russia the strongest, greatest Russia he can, and to go down in history as the greatest leader of Russia ever. And so if that's his goal, and I'm kind of just making that up, but I really do kind of feel like I see it.
You're not making it up, because I think that's what originally our founders were saying that our presidents need to be. Yeah. It was make America the greatest place on earth, so we could create the things that make the rest of the planet better.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that's the noble. It's a noble goal,
and I believe that he believes in presidency for life. I believe that he thinks that's the best system. I don't think it's the best system. Very few people, I think, would agree with that, but at least in America. But he believes it, and he believes that a strong, aggressive head of state for life that doesn't ever have to worry about losing his job is a great idea, probably. So, what our job is he's gone and invaded another country. We don't want the rule of the world to be that anytime a bigger country, stronger country wants to invade the country next to them, they can do it. We don't think that's the most positive situation, right? So then we pump money into Ukraine so Ukraine can defend itself against Russia. I don't know that our end goal is that Ukraine maintain its independence or doesn't maintain its independence, or it stays a beautiful place to live or gets completely bombed. I mean, obviously we want as little difficulty as possible, but at the end of the day, we're telling Russia, hey, it's not acceptable to invade the country next door to you. And if you do, it's going to cost you more than what you think it's going to cost. We can't make the cost greater than the benefit necessarily, but we can make the cost much higher than what they expected. And of course, the benefit to the Ukraine is you have the wheat fields and you have other resources, et cetera. And I don't know what those are worth to Russia, how many people they're willing to let die or kill, how many bombs they're willing to drop, how much money they're... But to make it more expensive for them is probably a reasonable goal for the United States, to send a message to the world that, hey, if you invade your neighbor, we won't necessarily will, but we may come in and help that neighbor to defend themselves from you, to make it more expensive, to make it less palatable to make that decision to invade your neighbor.
I mean, many people may say what I'm about to say is Russian propaganda, but I've really tried to dig into the storyline of why Russia did what they did, meaning from both sides, like listening to what. So the latest, I've heard this from Tucker. I've heard it from several other people that, not just Tucker, but several other people that I've listened to over time who I feel are saying things for the right purpose. Maybe they're Russian assets or something. I don't know. But so the argument that I've heard that's most compelling to me from I've never defended Russia, but like, so they were promised a very long time ago from a past presidency that the UN would never try to bring Ukraine into the United Nations.
Or I think it's NATO, but
NATO, exactly right. So NATO. So basically, what's happened is.
But I don't think that's a fair thing.
It might not be, but
that's like me telling your neighbor, "Hey, don't worry, I would never hire Chad."
Well, Ukraine, but
I won't hire Chad because I want to protect you.
Ukraine has a lot of Russian people in it.
Country.
Ukraine has a lot of Russian people in it. They were a part of Russia for a very long time, right?
We were part of England.
Yeah, well, I 100% agree with you. I 100% agree with you. I think strategically, though, again, so if you talk about conversations over time, if you talk about conversations between world leaders and agreements, it's not about what you want. It's not about what I want. It's about what can we talk about and what can we come to an agreement about. Again, the only thing I'm going to say is our politicians and our leaders told Putin that we would never bring United Nations into we would never bring them into NATO. We would never bring them into NATO. Right. And so again, because
he can, a very unfair promise to make.
I don't disagree with you. I
think that what we want Putin and the rest of the world to see in the end is it would have been less expensive and less of a catastrophe to, instead of bombing and invading Ukraine, to have paid Ukraine, paid them for the warm water ports that they wanted, paid them to stay out of NATO, paid them to, given them financial aid in exchange for them doing what they wanted them to do. I mean, if I want you to do something for me, I say, hey, I really want you to mow my lawn. And you say, well, I'm not really a lawn guy. I could recommend a couple. Like, well, I'll make it worth your while. What would you charge me to mow my lawn? Well, $200. Well, I have a very small lawn. It's probably worth $50, $30 to mow it. Okay, I'll give you $200 because I want you to mow my lawn. I'm not allowed to hold a gun to your head and say, no, you're mowing my lawn, right? Mm-hmm. It's the same thing as countries interact. Russia should have, in my opinion, paid Ukraine for what they wanted Ukraine to do that Ukraine didn't necessarily want to do.
Well, let's talk about that for a second.
Not invaded them and bombed them.
I agree with you.
That should be unreasonable.
I agree with you 100% on that.
It should be more expensive to invade and bomb.
I agree.
Than it is to just make a financial agreement.
So there's another storyline that, and I'm not. So again, we're not privy to what each other hears or listens to or believes or whatever. So in direct response to that, I have heard on numerous occasions that there was an agreement between Ukraine and Russia on the table. Mm-hmm. And that everybody was moving towards an agreement. And then Europe, I don't know if it was Yeltsin or who it was, our president basically had him go to Russia to say, or to Ukraine to say, do not accept this offer. And so while I do 100% agree with you, I feel like we've got enough bad actors on both sides that we're not getting the closest to the truth. So really, like, I think you and I could go back and forth on this in nuance for a long for a while. Yeah. But what information are we really hearing, and what do we really know? Who are we believing from either side?
But we didn't say to Ukraine, "Do what we want you to do, or we're going to bomb you." We probably said to Ukraine, if people from the U.S. government went into Ukraine and said, "Don't take Russia's deal," we probably said we'll pay more.
Well, I don't know. Maybe. I mean, that's one argument. That's one potential thing. But I also think, and here strategically, let me just say, I do not defend Russia. I do not.
Right. No,
I do not defend Putin or whatever. But if the United States is, let's look at our border in Canada. This is one potential thing, or Mexico, whichever border we only touch two other countries. Let's say that China or Russia became closer friends to either one of those groups and started working their way closer and closer to that line that borders on either side, to our north or to our south. Now, if our commander-in-chief is doing their job and protecting the citizenry right on the other side of
Well, we had that happen, right? We had that happen with Cuba.
Okay, so let's continue
Russia
playing it out. Let's continue
Cuba.
playing it out, right? So if we can't control Canada and what Canada does, if they start acting in a way that we don't like, we can do whatever it is that we're going to do to Canada, right? But if Russia makes some pact with them that they're going to come in, through the back door, what do we do? Can we take action on Canada? Can we take action on Canada if they do?
We already went through this with Cuba, and we negotiated it in the end. We had Bay of Pigs.
We don't share a border with them, though.
Well, it's 100 miles from Miami.
I know, but that's a big navy, a huge navy
and we've
between
got
it.
Bombs that will go easily from Cuba.
So again, we've got it. It's a different thing if they're jumping
and
a
we
line.
had missile silos in Key Largo.
Yeah.
And so we were pretty serious about that.
But it'd be similar to us having Palestinians.
Yeah.
In
the end,
bordering Israel.
We did not invade Cuba to get Russia out of Cuba. We negotiated our way through it.
Right.
And we are not crazy about Russia's influence on Cuba, but it hasn't really been a big problem for us. And yes, Cuba has access to really almost the entire East Coast at this point. If there's missile silos in Cuba, of course, we detected that was going to happen, and we negotiated our way through that. Now, yes, we threatened violent action, but we didn't actually start dropping bombs on Cuba. I don't believe that if China began to influence Mexico, that we would start dropping bombs on Mexico. I don't believe if China started influencing Canada, we'd drop bombs on Canada. We'd negotiate our way through it, and we would probably, if it really came to a head, I don't know exactly how we would handle it, but I am sure that we would do a much better job exhausting peaceful processes than Russia did when they invaded Ukraine. I think that Russia tried to muscle Ukraine because they thought muscling Ukraine would be cheaper than negotiating it.
Well, and I mean there's an argument for them to make on that.
And we want to make it more expensive,
right? Because
we want to tell China, hey, you have to negotiate these things. If you want Taiwan, you have to negotiate it. You're not allowed to just go and take it. And in other countries too. And there's a lot of small countries in different parts of the world that these things have happened to that we haven't done anything about it. And I think that we can't constantly be at war in every little burg everywhere in the world all the time. No,
Are you
I
sure?
don't think so.
It sure feels that way.
we don't have that many people.
That's another reason. There's another thread out there. Spinning back around to Trump. There's another basically thread, conspiracy if you want to call it, that the reason why the apparatus, everyone hates Trump in the establishment is because he didn't want war,
right?
And that he was very much trying to not put us in additional wars,
correct? And
that's the reason why these other things have gone off. So you add that one to the Russian-Ukraine conversation. Would that have ever happened if Trump was in office? I don't think so. I don't think it would have. And what does that say? Does that say that Putin's bloodthirsty and wants Ukraine come hell or high water? Or is there more to it? All I'm saying is there's more to it, that I feel like if we're making these big decisions, if we as people are trying to understand why our country and our president is making these decisions, I think it's fair for us to have a little more nuanced version of, here's the line in the sand. You need to communicate. You need to negotiate. This is what you get.
The line in the sand. And when Iraq invaded Kuwait, one of the big things that they blamed, whether we were getting the truth or not, was that the president was very ambiguous, and the leadership was very ambiguous as Iraq put troops on the Kuwait border, toward the Kuwait border. We were aware of it, and no one sat and slammed their head down on a table and said, Iraq, if you go into Kuwait, we are going to go over there and we are going to mess you guys up. Mm-hmm. And they didn't do that. And Iraq, as I understand it, Iraq felt like, hey, they're going to let this happen. And this is going to be financially very positive for our country. We should do this. And they went into Kuwait, and of course we responded. And it was my understanding that Saddam Hussein was surprised by that response, that he didn't see that coming or expect that at all. And maybe we didn't get the truth. I don't know. Maybe it was a play for oil or something that we let it happen, and then we could go back and be the heroes and get paid for that. But I don't think we really came out ahead. And
Well,
but
I'll
individuals
say,
often.
I agree. So everything, I think what your assessment of that whole situation was perfectly in line with everything that we've heard, and I think you're accurate in that.
And I wonder if we were ambiguous to Russia a little bit before they invaded Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean,
They're
like
not a little surprised.
the thing for me is, again, like the truth-seeking apparatus piece of it is, once you start peeling the onion and you get back to kind of the original lie, whatever that original lie is, where it's
Right.
it goes off course here, and then we're building everything on top of that. To me, and this is maybe a flaw in my character, maybe it's a benefit, I don't know. But it's like, okay, now that I know you're a proven liar, what other things are you really lying about, and where do I need to go back to the source of the truth? I'm not saying you. I'm talking about
I know.
the narrative and the narratives and how they've come out. It's like there's clearly an apparatus here that wants things a certain way, and you go back through the big things that have happened in history that have turned in, they called conspiracy theories and they weren't. They turned out being largely true. And once you figure out, well, the CIA, and you said it yourself, the CIA has done things and the FBI has done things which you and I would consider to be unacceptable and outside of what they should be doing, right?
First of all, organizations don't do anything. Individuals do things.
Right.
And individuals do things because they either desire a positive outcome for themselves or they desire to avoid a negative outcome for themselves. And so when you have a power structure that from the top down can say to an individual, you do this or you don't do that, or you're going to have this negative outcome on this side or this positive outcome on this other side, it takes a huge amount of character, much more character than the average man has, to fight against that. Most people are going to say, I know this is horrible, but I'm going to do it because I'm going to follow orders. And I am going to keep my career on track. And I'm going to seek out staying away from this pain that I want to avoid, or I'm going to seek out getting this reward that I want to receive. And I think that I think that's the way the human mind operates. I think that when you look at what Joe Biden or Putin or any Zai or anybody else does, Elon Musk, at the end of the day, it's because they want to achieve something or they want to avoid some level of pain. And I think that the average person does not have the character to say, I know this is bad, I know this is evil, but I'm not going to do it, or I am going to do it because it's what's right. I think that is the reason we revere that kind of courage is because it is special. It's
very true.
You look at what happened in Hitler's Germany and the depths to where I want to avoid pain and I want to get the reward, go to what people are actually willing to do, how they're really willing to behave, even if it's completely against their moral values, in order to, you got to play along to get along, right? So I think that's where a lot of things root from that are wrong, and you have to understand that for someone to rise to the top, to become a billionaire, multi-billionaire, to be the president of the United States, to be one of these top achieving people. Many of them, I'm not going to say all of them, I won't even necessarily say most of them, but many of them have had to make serious compromises with their values in order to achieve those things. And then those are the people that are running the world, not even the company, not the country, the world. So your Putin is a certain type of person. Your Biden isn't a completely different kind of person. Your Hitler isn't a completely different kind of person. I'm not saying that everybody's as evil as Hitler, but what I'm saying is that these ideas that Hitler had in his mind, who knows where they came from, or why they were there, or why he was such a horrible person, Pol Pot or whatever.
Yeah, did they start off as noble intentions and then just at some point flip. I mean, who knows? That's a really
Everybody
interesting.
starts as a baby. I don't think any human being is born evil or born completely good. I think we make choices along the way, and we descend into a valley, or we climb a mountain.
Yeah, very true.
So not to get too deep about it. So,
No, I mean
but
that
when
was
you're
a perfect amount of depth. That was excellent.
when you're looking for why did this happen, why did this person do this, how could this have happened, and how could this have not gotten out before this or whatever, it's purely human nature to seek out what's rewarding and to avoid what is painful. And I think that most politicians, are seeking what's good for the country or good for their community or whatever, initially and in their heart, but then they're saying, well, I can't keep this job unless I do this or unless I avoid that.
They get compromised.
If I don't go along, I'm not going to be here anymore.
Right.
The party will turn against me. These people will turn, and some of that's perception and some of it's reality. And the thing about Trump is he went in and he said, I'm doing things my way, come hell or high water. And he did. And it worked out very, very well for the nation. But at the same time, it probably cost some careers. It probably kept some people from rising that felt like they would have risen otherwise. And like you said, he shook up the system. And people don't want the system shook up.
Well, I mean, he ran on draining the swamp, and I will say that I don't think he did a great job of that. I mean, I always look to him and say, regardless of how he goes down in history, to me, he will be a hero in one way, and that is he called into question the media, and he put a spotlight on the media to where we all can now look at things, and a new media apparatus kind of rose from the ashes of that, and if he's done anything for the country, I think in the end that will be one of the best things that he's ever done long term. Now we can talk about the policies and how we were trending in good directions and all that. And unfortunately, with our system, you were talking about, the thing about if you've got the right dictator, it can be really good. You know what I mean? It's like if you get somebody that's the country's moving in the right direction, well, can we just keep this going for a little bit? The problem is there's always people, there's people that believe Obama did a great job. There's people that believed Clinton did a great job or Bush did a great job. And there's many people that would spend their life arguing to the exact opposite of that. So if you have an apparatus that's allowing those conversations to happen and really pinpointing where the nuances are, I think, you can probably have a more robust conversation. But the counter to what you said, about Trump is the whole apparatus to me was against him. If he came in saying I'm going to drain the swamp and I don't want wars, well, you've automatically got the military-industrial complex not wanting you there, and you're
hurting careers.
You've got Washington D.C. not wanting you there because 80% of them never leave. So it's like if they find out there's a risk, then who are they going to align with? Trump people? Are they going to align with the apparatus that's entrenched, the CIA, the FBI?
They want career politicians and career bureaucrats who are not going to shake up the system and aren't going to spoil their life.
Yep.
The guy, a guy's making mistakes and he's doing some things right and he's making the best decisions he can with the information he has at hand, which is not complete information. And he wants to move up the ladder and he wants to maintain what he has and he wants to move up the ladder. Then a guy comes in and says, no, we're not doing this way anymore. And your job is unnecessary, or your job is unnecessary, but we can use you over here. Well, yeah, now you're messing with my life. I don't want my life messed with. You are not part of the program. You're not a career politician.
Right.
You're not a career bureaucrat. And so, you have the two levels. One is people who get into power who want to do things that are positive for them but negative for the country. And you have the other side of the guy who just wants to maintain his job and keep moving up through the ranks. And they can't have these people coming in who are all of a sudden saying, this isn't good for the country. We're going to do something different, and screwing up their career, screwing up their life. And so I understand that motivation to keep a guy like Trump, and that's why I think term limits are so important, is because if we, on the Supreme Court for life, I think on the Supreme Court until your 75th birthday makes more sense. I think that...
and there should be tests maybe that make sure that you're altogether there mentally.
Yeah, and as long as you can keep winning congressional races, you can stay in the Congress. I think, at least put an age limit on it of you cannot serve after you're 75, so you can't run after you're 70. Would that be 72 with Congress and 70 for the Senate?
You will get no argument from me about term limits and or age limits.
Yeah, either one works. But term limits probably work a little better than age limits, but it doesn't really matter. You can put an age limit on it.
Because you can look at Trump, who I think anyone that's neutral can say cognitively he's mostly still there, whereas most people, if they look at Biden neutrally, they be like, he said what? And I mean, you just can't look at him and say there's a healthy mind speaking rational things there.
Well, we were all teenagers. We can't all relate to being older because we haven't been older yet, but we were all teenagers, and we all thought we were ready for things that we weren't ready for as we were growing up. When we were 10, we thought we were ready for 15-year-old things. When we were 15, we thought we were ready for 20-year-old things, et cetera.
Right.
You go through the same thing as you get older. You were able to do it. You feel like you should be able to still do it. You feel like you can still do it. I'm not as good as I was, but I'm still great, and
you're more wise. You've got wisdom.
And I've got wisdom. Yeah. But the fact is, we all decline as we get older. We all mentally decline and physically decline. We don't want to admit it. You're 50. I'm 59.
My golf game is still getting better, though.
Yeah.
My golf game is still getting better.
It's because you're focusing on it more, not because your body's getting better.
Not as much as I'd like,
you're
though.
Getting more, you're getting more limber or anything.
That's right.
And so, I mean, there's a point at which you really don't need to be don't need to be running the United States of America or even being in the Senate or the Congress, et cetera. There's an age, what happened with Strom Thurmond, that was just ridiculous. What was he, in his 90s or something crazy? Mm-hmm. And he was there his whole life, basically. It's got to limit these guys. And then maybe as they're getting closer to their limit, they have less to lose, and maybe they work a little harder at doing what's right for the country instead of what's right to stay in office, because staying in office isn't an option anyway.
Sure. Well, I'm hopeful that you and I might tap our toe into AI and technology and all that stuff, because I know it heavily impacts your whole industry. But one of the things I'm hopeful for with AI is a forced transparency in some way. To me, if we can put together a platform that says, okay, I'm going to take every speech or every conversation or every video which X politician has said, here's kind of the storyline, and here's what they've said versus here's how they voted and here's what they've done, and then hold them accountable to those things. And also, I feel this is just me. I feel like if you said term limits, I'm 100% on board with that. Mm-hmm. I feel like if you work for the federal government, you should be open to extreme transparency in finance. Mm-hmm. Meaning, how does a Nancy Pelosi making $170,000 a year become a multi-gazillionaire while she's in Congress? Well, she knows when things are happening. She's setting up the deals, and she's benefiting on both sides. And I think that's not just her. There's Mitch McConnell. You can name some on either side that do that. And that's part of it for me, is like the transparency. What people don't trust is, how do these people become the top stock market predictors on the planet? They're better than people that do stock prediction for a living.
If you don't personally have a moral problem with something that you want to do and it's not illegal, then there's nothing wrong with it. So the question you have there is should it be illegal? Should it be illegal to use information that you have or abilities that you have to trade in stocks as an elected leader? And my opinion is that it should be just as illegal whether you're on the board of directors and you want to trade in that stock based on a decision that you're making, or if you're a politician and you want to trade on that stock based on a decision you're making, or if you're on the board of directors and you're getting information other people don't have, it's illegal to trade in the stock based on
getting ready to go public.
Yeah, and if you are a politician, you should have the same rules, because essentially, the politicians are the ultimate board of directors for every American company. If you really think about it, they can tell the board of directors what they're allowed to do and not allowed to do. Therefore, they should be held to that same standard. You had brought up electric cars, and I know I'm diverging, but
No, I told you this could go anywhere, everywhere, in all different directions all at the same time.
so electric cars are a great product, a fantastic product, but it has to be appropriate to the way that you want to use the car. My guess is that electric cars are appropriate for about a third of all vehicle purchases. That'd be 5 million, 6 million vehicles a year.
Just in America.
4 to 6 million vehicles a year in the United States. I'm going to limit myself to the United States because I don't know enough about the rest of. I mean, I've been all over the world, but I don't know enough about how they're living or whatever. And the reason I say that is because you get up in the morning and you do your thing and you unplug your car and you get in your car and you start using it for the day. And then you go home at night and you plug your car in and you charge it in your garage. And the cost of charging that car is estimated by some people to be about 15% of what it costs to put gas in the car. Plus, you never have to stop at the gas station, which means you're never sitting there while your car is gassing and decide to go to the bathroom, which means you're never walking by the hoo-hoos and the ho-hos and the donuts and all the stuff you don't need from the
You pay attention
store.
to me. You must follow me around.
Which means you save about, I don't know, 100 calories a week, 200 calories a week.
At least.
and you save that time. So, I mean, for a typical person who's just using their car locally and when they go on vacation, they're flying or whatever, an electric car is the right choice. And they should buy one. For a person who says, gosh, I might have to run up, 150 miles there and back at any given time. My boss is in this city. My grandma's in that city. My mom's in this city. And I've got all this running around I do. And when I go on vacation, I like to drive. I don't like to fly. They need a gasoline car. And a gasoline car is the right decision for them, and they should buy that. If the government wants to get people to not do something, they have to punish it. What the government does to punish things is they make it illegal and have criminal penalties, or they tax it. Tax is a punishment. It's a punishment for making too much money. It's a punishment for doing things that the government thinks are not in the best interest of the government. Okay? Tax is a punishment. So if the government says, I want people to use less gasoline, the government can tax the gasoline. But so why don't they? They don't, because it'd be a very unpopular thing to do. And every single person in the government wants to get reelected. And so they don't want to attach their name to an idea to double the price of gasoline. Now, I don't think gasoline should be doubled. That's not my personal opinion. But I do know this. If you want people to switch away from gasoline, you tax gasoline. Instead, they try to do it in all other kinds of ways. We're taxing the business. We're not taxing you. Well, next thing you know, a Ford F-150 is $75,000, $80,000, $100,000 for a top-of-the-line one. And you're like, how'd that happen? Well, because, there's a lot of things going on, including taxes and threatened taxes for average gas mileage and EPA rules, et cetera. So you're paying the tax. A business never pays the tax. You pay the tax.
It all filters down to us for sure.
Exactly. So if you want more people to use electric cars, tax gasoline. Another thing you can do is you can incentivize. What I think is strange is the incentivizing buying the electric car. I think the incentive should be putting the charger in your home or in your place of business. If the government said for every level 2 charger, that's better than plugging it into a wall outlet, but not as good as a fast charger. If they said for every level 2 charger you install, the government is going to give you a $1,000 tax credit, a whole lot of people would spend it's essentially $1,000 to install one, would install the chargers, because it's basically a charger that the government's paying for, that you're increasing the value of your property, the value of your restaurant, the value of your hotel, the value of your home by installing it. And it's a little bit of a pain in the butt to install it, so people wouldn't install it just to get the thing for free. And once you had chargers everywhere, level 2 chargers everywhere, when I went to a restaurant, I'd just plug in. When I go to a hotel, I'll just plug in. When I go home, I just plug in. And maybe you have to run your credit card in it, maybe you don't. Which brings me to the level 3 chargers.
Before you get there, we'll come back to level 3. I'm going to make a note here. I'm very much in line with the incentivize versus punishment.
Well, I appreciate that. We all are.
Well, I mean, punishment to me ultimately is tyranny. I mean, you have, and here's the only reason why. So the government says they want to push people away from gasoline. Well, they have reasons for that. They have, we could get into the nuances of why they have reasons to do that. There's a lot of political reasons, a lot of political pressure. The green movement is a whole nother thing. You and I probably could spend a whole podcast series talking about. What I have a problem with is it seems like as an American, as our country was founded, the founders came from England and other countries to get away from tyranny and to get away from excessive taxation. And yet we've pushed ourselves right back into basically the same or worse than we were. Whereas most people, if you look at it, doesn't matter what your tax bracket is, you're spending about half of your money is taxed. I mean,
I love to talk about tax.
Yeah. So I know, and this is one of your subjects. So for me, I have a real problem with them using a push away from gasoline for multiple reasons. This is something I pay very close attention to, from human flourishing around the globe to whatever. So if you're saying just gas is bad because it's causing global warming, well, that's really not compelling enough to me right now because of everything that I'm listening to from scientists, not just the approved scientists, but other scientists. This, as I mentioned earlier on, I don't even remember if the mic was hot yet, but our globe is healthier and more thriving than it's ever been, meaning people who've been in extreme poverty, less and less people are dying from cold exposure, which kills most people, more people than anything. So there's all these things that are arguing against it. But locally here in America, I don't mind the 1/3 estimate, like 1/3 cars should be electric. I think there's a natural grow-in period. You and I could talk about what that grow-in period would look like. But pushing and forcing Americans to pay more taxes on gasoline puts us in a disadvantage at multiple levels. First of all, if China and India are not participating in this push for global warming reduction, then we are basically funding nothing. I mean, we're getting penalized for making the globe cleaner and cooler, whereas the people that are really causing the problem in China and India are putting in coal factories. They're pushing gasoline as much as they can. They're buying all the oil reserves they can. And so strategically, it's just not very intelligent. Now, I think there's a lot of benefit to electric cars without having to talk about its impact on global warming. Everything that you said is there's a really good firm list.
I'd rather have an electric golf cart when I'm playing golf than a gasoline golf cart. But I've played golf on some very mountainous terrain where you simply can't have an electric golf cart because it won't get around the course. So when I'm on flat terrain in Florida, obviously you're going to have a golf cart if you're not walking,
and a lot of sun. If you're powering it with the sun and recharging with the sun, that's a whole nother benefit.
And if you have the mild hills of southern Indiana, where we're from, the electric is fine. So I would much rather, if electric is an option, I'd rather have an electric golf cart because it's quieter. I like the way they ride better. But if I'm in the mountains, I'm going to have a gasoline golf cart. And I'm fine with that because the electric golf cart won't make it around. Same thing with your personal car. Maybe there's 2 cars in the household. Maybe one of the people in the household has the Ford Expedition. It burns gas, or maybe they have a Suburban, a real gas burner, and that's what they use. And then the other spouse has a Ford Mustang Mach-E and charges it every night and uses that. But, now the Mach-E spouse has a meeting 200 miles away. Well, they just flip cars. They don't both have to go different directions maybe. Sure. So it's not that big a deal. And the Mach-E driver has the convenience of just plugging in at night, not worrying about gas stations, not worrying about anything. It's just like your cell phone. You plug it at night and it goes all day. And the Expedition driver has the convenience of, if at the last minute they've got to run up to see their kid at college or whatever, they take it up there. So I see the benefits of both. On the level 3 chargers, what I wanted to say about those, what I think is is so important to say about them is there's a lot of negatives to them. They are fast. You can just charge at will. They're going to make them better and better and charge faster and faster, which is great. But they're extremely expensive, and they're complicated, and they have a lot of breakdowns. And at this point, I don't believe a level 3 charger lasts more than 2 or 3 years. They say they'll last 7. Maybe they will. I don't know.
And a level 3 charger, is that something that me as a private citizen could potentially put in my house?
That's where they're saying it's no. That would be like a gas station.
Okay.
And you would put your credit card in, and they'd charge you for it.
Okay.
So in the end, those level 3 chargers are extremely expensive to install, and they're expensive to maintain. So, and with their useful life of about, let's call it 5 to 7 years. I believe it's less, but let's call it 5 to 7 years. They have to charge you so much money for using the charger. So get out of your mind, I'm buying the energy. I'm renting the use of the charger,
sure,
which is very, very expensive. So it costs as much, one, to charge a car with a fast charger because of the use of the equipment as it does to fill it up with gasoline.
Right.
So it's not a cost savings.
So your any cost savings that you would get from not paying for gas is basically washed off right there.
Charging at home overnight is much, much less expensive than gasoline. The level 3 charger, fast charging, is just as expensive as gasoline. The second thing is when you fast charge a battery, you wear the battery out quicker. And these are expensive batteries.
That's another topic I'd like to talk about a little bit.
And when the car's, when the battery's gone, it's like your engine being gone in your car. And you go into the dealership and you're like, oh, what do I need? You need an engine. Oh, how much is the engine? $16,000. And your car, even with the engine, is only worth $8,000.
Yeah.
So it's time to get a new car.
Right.
What do you do with my old car? Well, we sell it to the junkyard and they
recycle it, hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah. And so this is the same situation on an electric car, except instead of losing the engine, it's when you lose the battery. Well, if you're using the level 3, the fast chargers, you're going to lose your battery much quicker. And I don't really know that we're close at all on solving that issue with building batteries. So at the end of the day, the electric car is really only useful for the distance it can go. And by the way, when somebody says something's a 200-mile electric car, that means in very cold weather, in hilly terrain, etc., it goes 100 miles. If they say it's a 300-mile car in very cold weather or hot weather where you're running the air conditioner like crazy or hilly terrain or whatever, you have to assume it's a 150-mile car. And so on and so forth. They're going to build 500, 600, 700-mile cars. They are eventually, which means in really bad weather they'll get 300, which will be a lot make those cars more usable. So that will be solved down the road. But the fast charging thing, I don't think is ever going to be charged as far as putting stress on the fast charging equipment, which is going to make it very expensive to use that equipment. And putting stress on your battery, which is going to make your battery not last as long and cost you a lot in the value of the car.
Do you think there's any path to one of the arguments? So I try to listen to arguments on both sides of electric cars and both sides of alternative energies and all that stuff, right? And one of the things that frequently comes up with electric cars is batteries. You mentioned it; they're expensive, right? And there's more and more people research and investigative reporting about basically the materials for batteries and where those things come from,
right.
and the human costs attached to it, and there's a lot of moral conversations that are being had about that. So there's several concerns. My concern is, are we beholden to certain countries right now for battery production moving forward, that if we get into some kind of a bad situation where China doesn't like us or want to help us anymore in any way, shape, or form, there's a lot of problems that happen in solar and wind energy because of a lot of the products that we power those things with come from China. So they could put a sanction on us pretty quick if they wanted to, and put us in. I think you dealt with this in the car industry whenever COVID hit and everything shut down. There was a big computer chip shortage for a long time, and so you see the flow of things basically stop, and yet you still have the needs. And like it's one thing if you don't have to sell a car anymore. I know that was really crappy for you, but for us, it's like, okay, well, we just got to make this beater last a little longer or whatever. Yeah. But if you're putting yourself beholden to a country or a supply chain, and the power goes out or the whatever goes out, basically, you know, and the Agenda 2030 basically is saying they want us more and more on non-fossil fuels, non-coal, non-whatever. And we're not doing nuclear. So basically that's putting us down a very short into a little narrow path here. And so my concern again is like we'll be beholden to China is part of it. Like they could disrupt the supply chain for many reasons. But then again, from a battery perspective, like, do you feel like there could be potentially something that comes in and takes the place of the battery situation, whether it's a different kind of power source and storage source? I mean, there's been a lot of stuff of technology in the past, but
yeah, the battery is storage, right?
Yes, the battery is storage of energy. Power.
But the thing is with energy is bad. Energy is bad for like a whole lot of reasons, but we all really enjoy it.
It's the most important thing on the planet.
Right.
If you don't have energy, you kind of have major problems.
But it's all bad. I mean, every bit of it. Pumping oil is not good. Depending on foreign oil, sometimes is not good. The solar, there's negative things about that. There's negative things about nukes. There's negative things about coal. There's negative things about, you know, these. It seems like there are interested groups because they're going to make money, right? And whenever you have a technology shift, you create more billionaires, right? Which people want to be billionaires. So they whitewash some things more than they should be whitewashed, and they make other things more evil than they ought to be. And I'm not necessarily an energy scientist, so to sit there and say what's better and what's worse is
there's a war between people there's a war between petroleum people and battery people just because it's controlling.
But it's all bad.
Yeah.
Every bit of it's bad. Every bit of it pollutes. Every bit of it uses unnecessary, or uses labor. Every bit of it, Now when you go to the interaction between nations, the interactions between people, that creates difficulty, but it also creates peace. And what I mean by that is if two countries are heavily dependent on each other, they're less likely to fight. And when the two countries feel like they're not so dependent on each other, one has it so much over the other, then there's more likely to be difficulties and problems and discomfort, et cetera. So yeah, I think it's better for the United States to not be dependent on foreign countries. But I also think that sucking into where you're completely not dependent on any other foreign country probably holds you back economically also.
I don't have any problem being dependent on foreign countries. Right. I don't have diversify, spread out. Like if you've got, and I was I worked within the Toyota family for a while, and they were very big on their supply chain coming from a diverse realm. Like if something went down or went bad, they could shift gears. They could shift gears and go in a different direction.
Exactly.
I don't sense that diversity in the battery, electric, solar, wind, any of these. I don't sense any diversity, and this is a topic we're not going to get into at all. Well, but for me, China is a I know people that are Chinese very well. I know people that I went to high school with who are Chinese, whose parents spoke half and half Chinese, and grandparents that live in the house that only speak Chinese, who pay attention to where they came from. They pay attention to newspapers. They pay attention. China is not our friend. They don't really, and I'm talking about from a societal, cultural level. They've been trained for a very long time that our system is not, Mao's China was a very brutal dictatorship, right?
Right.
I actually just listened to a podcast this morning. I said Tucker a couple times. I don't know if you listened to him, but he interviewed a lady named G. Van Fleet this morning. Actually, I think the episode dropped yesterday. And basically, she escaped Mao's China and she came to America, and she's got a really interesting story to tell. And basically, my point is, I'm paying attention to not just fossil fuels and versus electric or whatever. I'm paying attention to Chinese influence on our country, societal level, and how they're positioning themselves to us. So my friend who I went to high school with, who I trust more than anything, when I first started this direction of mine, he was one of the first people that came to me after COVID and was like, do you know anything about what's going on with China and whatever? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, a little bit. I've been paying attention. He's like, well, pay attention to this stuff and see what you think. The whole moral of that is, to me, they never were wanting to go to war with us. China does not want to get into a physical battle with us. They don't want to invade us in any way, shape, or form. But we are a threat. They've always considered us a threat.
Well, they want to do what is in China's best interest and not in our best interest. Well, they'd like to control trade in the Pacific Ocean, which we currently control trade in the Pacific Ocean. They'd like to control the trade in the Pacific Ocean.
Right.
And they have a lot of ideas of what they'd like to achieve as a nation that we're in the way of. But, back when my dad was 8 years old and we were dropping nuclear bombs on Japan, who's now our friend, and we were saving China from the tyranny of the Japanese Empire, who was our friend then but isn't necessarily our friend now, before Mao took over, which we paved the way for that, I suppose, in one way or another. My point is this. Your friends become your enemies become your friends. When you get in the way of what they see as their prize, what they desire, or you start causing them pain, they're not going to be your friend anymore. So is Mexico our friend? Are they going to be our friend? Is Canada our friend? Are they going to be our friend? It all changes all the time. So in one way, these interdependencies create friendships. In other ways, they make not being friends very, very painful. So
but if it's a chess game, though,
we need interdependence.
Well,
on
some things I will agree with you.
Not where we're more dependent on them than they are on us, but
on some things I'll agree with you.
The way you control those things, though, is tariffs. You control them with tariffs. You say, I don't want to buy as much from this country because we're becoming more dependent on that country than their dependence on us. And so you start tariffing their products. Well, they start tariffing your products. And it becomes a little tariff war like we had with Trump.
Well, and if ours is energy, if they're tariffing our energy,
right,
that's the most important, expensive thing to each individual citizen. I mean, even down to the local level, you have people's electric and bills that are doubling over a short window of time, right? So you put in tariffs and another country's ability to control our livelihood and our,
But why were the chips all coming from China and Taiwan, etc.?
Because our
that's
government
where they were the cheapest.
Yeah.
And why were they the cheapest? Because we didn't tariff them.
And we didn't diversify and
if the
give
United
the
States had said, "Hey, we're buying all our chips from this place," that's a problem, and we started tariffing those chips, what would the chip companies have done? They'd have started manufacturing them in America to avoid the tariffs. I mean, so a lot of it is surgical tariffing of products, certain products, and surgical tariffing of products from certain places that maybe aren't product driven but are location driven, to reward and punish other foreign countries that we want to reward and punish. And Trump had a great handle on that, and he was doing a fantastic job with it.
I would agree that things were much better in that realm.
But then when the guy who produces 50% of the whatever comes to you and says, "Hey, I produce 50% of the whatever in the United States. Of my whatever, 40% goes to this country that we're now tariffing, and they're putting a tariff on my product," then you have to decide, well, he's a political donor. This is going to cost me a lot of political donations. It's going to cost our party a lot of money. Do I go ahead and back down to benefit him, to benefit the party, to benefit me and my standing in the party to get reelected, to keep my job, okay? Now all of a sudden you're not talking about benefiting America or hurting America. You're talking about benefiting this guy to keep his donations coming in. I mean, it gets really slippery. And then you've got the situations that I don't think a lot of people talk about. We've used this. Britain was the master at it for a long time. Paying the individual people. Maybe you don't pay them. Maybe you hire their children. Maybe you put their child on an energy board or something like that to pay them to make it profitable for that individual to vote the way you want them to vote and do what you want them to do, because you're holding the strings to their child, or you're holding the strings to their family wealth in one way or another. And of course, we've all used that trick at one way at one time or another. All the countries have, and
some have scaled it better than
it
others.
seems like lately some have done better at it. At different times, different countries do better at it.
Right.
So you can go in and invade the country, or you can just give the guys who run the country maybe $4 billion, and then you don't have to worry about invading it. They'll do what you want them to anyway. So these all these different things coming together, benefits for certain industries, benefits for certain companies, benefits for certain politicians and certain politicians' family members, and all these things are coming together to create policy. And the policy is not always looking out for the American people. It might be looking out for their family. It might be looking out for their industry or chosen industry or a chosen company.
Well, I want to go a little deeper though, because I think you're talking political alliance and working together and having fair trade and having relationships with other countries. And I'm not against any of that. I really am not. But I think Trump hit this on the head several times, and it probably didn't gain him any fans. But he talks about China a lot, right? And he talks about how we've become beholden to them in many ways. And I'm even more strategic in that. So until my conspiracy theory, it's not a conspiracy theory, is proven otherwise, it's like we have ourselves behind the eight ball with them in at many levels. So you mentioned computer chips, and their threat to Taiwan. A lot of computer chips come through Taiwan, and so that's putting us in potential conflict right there, because we don't want them to take over Taiwan, because we feel strategically that would be really bad for us and for the rest of the world.
Taiwan's a stepping stone for them to control the Pacific trade,
right?
And we want to control the Pacific trade,
right? So but they're not really wanting to negotiate that. I mean, they're continuing moving similar, not the same, but similar to Russia and Ukraine. It's like they're continuing to do kind of what they want to do, because that's in their best interest in their plan. And we're putting ourselves in potential harm's way, or World War III conversations and nuclear conversations, all the while we're handing them the keys to our car. And in many ways, the energy grid, if it goes down, you said it, energy is bad as far as it's dirty, but it's required 100%.
Right.
I mean, if we can't live without energy,
there's no such thing as clean energy. There's no such thing as good energy. There's no such thing as positive political energy.
You either have energy or you don't.
Yeah. And all of it is something we have to sacrifice for to have it. So, and we choose to make that sacrifice.
Well, again, I'm all on board with electric vehicles, I think the third.
If people want them, they should have them.
Yeah.
If they don't want them, they shouldn't have to.
Yeah, and I think a third is a pretty interesting number. I've never heard it kind of shot that way at me. Most of the things you hear from California, the people in politics in California, is like they're not going to allow gas power cars to be made in California anymore in the whatever foreseeable future. And then you just kind of position your society to be beholden to a technology that right now funnels through one area of the world. And that to me is just a risk strategically. It's putting our grandkids in a potential harm that we are hoping that some politician in the future might be able to resolve through conversations. And yet it's like, I just don't like it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Like I've always thought, like, okay, if you want to get rid of fossil fuels, taxation is fine. Tax whatever and put that towards new technology. and new energy delivering systems and more efficiency and all these things. But that's never the way it doesn't end up going to that. It goes to this program or that program or whatever. And it's never gone anywhere. And it's very similar. I mean, we could talk about nuclear if you wanted, just from an energy perspective, because, China's all in on doing nuclear. They're all in on doing coal. They're all in on doing tidal and, water. Any way that they can get energy, they are. And we're not. We're going all in on solar or wind. And I'm like, and they're taxing coal and trying to stop coal from being pulled from the ground. I mean, and guess what coal does? It powers the electric car. So, I mean, you got a war going on in different directions here. And I think strategically, again, this is just one of my BS meters going on internally. I don't think there's a lot of politicians out here that are smarter than you. Okay. And I can see how your brain operates and you get things from a large context. If this was a doable plan, to me, we're all teachable. Like, show me how this is going to look. Give me a timeline of, we're going to do this, and 5 years from now we're going to have that. But it's all lip service. There's nothing that we can physically look at and say, this is why this is going to work, and this is how we're going to get around this potential problem.
Well, I have this problem in my house. My wife will decide that she's cold. And so she'll set the temperature on 80 because she's cold.
You are not alone in that, my friend.
And she feels like if she sets the temperature on 80, that it'll get up to 72 or 74 or whatever she desires quicker than if she just sets it on 74.
72.
Now, us guys, now I'm going to include a lot of women in that too, typically know that your furnace is on or off.
Right.
And so if you have it set on 72 and it's 71, it's on until it's 72. Turning it on 80 doesn't make it more on.
You're not building a bigger fire back there. Yeah. It's not like you're throwing more logs on and it gets hotter.
Yeah. We've been married 35 years and I've not been able to get that concept across. So she'll turn it on 80, wanting it to be 72 or 73.
Is this going to be one of those clips that you want to remove? Or
No. No, this isn't. And what I'm saying is that these people jump out, talk about California or whatever. We're not going to have any gasoline cars. Well, they're going to get up to 72 or 73 degrees, whatever's comfortable for them. And they're going to say, oh, we need to turn that thermostat back down because that 80 doesn't really make any sense, And so I think that's what we're going through a little bit. They're like, they want more solar. They want more wind.
I know, but they're shutting down. They're shutting down.
Right.
They're
over-responding.
They're shutting down our coal production. They're
overcorrecting.
Yes.
But that coal is still in the ground.
It is.
And we can still go back and get it out when we want to get it out one day, and we will.
Well, I think we should be more in the loop as to when that happens. But they're wasting
our money. They're wasting our money in the meantime,
right,
as the people paying for the power. They're wasting our money putting unnecessarily excessive restrictions on the power companies.
Right.
And so we see our power bills go up. And then when they want to reopen the coal mines and restart some of that coal for this and that, we're going to have to pay for that. Because in the end, the government doesn't pay for anything. We do. Businesses don't pay for anything. We do. I had a discussion with a friend the other day about businesses paying income tax. I said, I don't think businesses should pay income tax.
Amen.
And he was like, what in the world? How can you? He got so frustrated, he finally just left the conversation. But
does that mean you won? I think that means you won.
Businesses should reinvest their money. Businesses should buy their stock back. Businesses should pay their loans down. Businesses should not pay income tax. Now, when they pay a dividend, or when the business owner takes money out, or when the business pays the employees, et cetera, then they maybe should pay an income tax. Personally, I don't believe throwing this in. I don't think that individuals who make less than, I'd say, $50,000 on an individual basis, $100,000 on a family basis, should pay any income tax at all. Because the fact is, they're going to spend every dime they make in their lifetimes. 99% of them are. And they're paying taxes, in my thought, on tariffs. They're paying sales taxes. They're paying taxes that are going to people's wages for products that they buy, et cetera. They're paying enough tax. Those people need to be focused on building their families. And you say, well, how do you replace that tax revenue? If you have to replace the tax revenue, Replace it with a tariff, replace it with a sales tax, replace it with a tax on something that you want people to consume less of because it harms your country or it's doing business with a foreign power we're not excited about doing business with. And those people will pay that tax when they buy those hot dogs or when they buy that gasoline or whatever. They don't need to be filing an income tax return except to say, I made less than $100,000. I made less than $50,000, or maybe you want to adjust it for how many kids they have or whatever. They don't need to be filing an income tax that says I made this much and then take off this. And then what about this income credit? And I want to vote for this guy because I want to keep my income credit, or whatever the heck it. Why are we getting so complicated with the 90% of people, 95% of the people, and then we're only income taxing 5-10% of the people? And then it gets a lot easier to keep track of what those people are doing. Are they paying what they're supposed to be paying or not? You don't need 47 zillion
It's too complex
IRS employees.
I think this leads right into one of the topics you wanted to talk about, and I'm super interested in, is inflation. And basically, where inflation comes from, what happens or whatever. And you also, the perfect lead in was the income tax thing to me. So, you're right. I agree with you about income tax. I'd actually say income tax bracket where you don't pay any income tax should be higher than that. And the only direct argument I have that in the moment that I feel like I need to use is, why do we pay income taxes at all if we can print money off of a printer with really no accountability or way of paying it back, quote unquote, and send that to Ukraine or wherever else we're sending money in the world without any say-so in it, without any audit of it, without any knowledge of where it's going? That affects, and I think you would agree with this because you follow inflation. Inflation is the worst tax that you can do
Correct.
on people. And so,
and it's a tax on poverty.
It's a tax on poverty.
Not a tax on the rich.
Exactly right.
It's a tax on the poor.
Yeah, because a loaf of bread doubles. Who does that affect the most? The poorest of people.
Well, no, it's not just that. Rich people own stuff. I don't know very many people that are, quote unquote, worth $10 million that have $10 million in the bank. They own stock, they own real estate, they own things that go up with inflation. So their net worth may be hurt a little bit, but isn't really hurt very much by inflation. But you take the average Joe making $50,000 a year with a wife and a couple of kids, he doesn't own any stocks. He maybe is renting. He doesn't have, he maybe owns a car, maybe, he owns some things, but not much.
Nothing of value that pays him anything.
Nothing that really goes up in value with inflation. So he gets hit really hard. Then you take the real poor who really literally own nothing. They rent everything. They rent an apartment, which comes with a refrigerator. But if they doesn't come with a refrigerator, they go down to Rental and rent a refrigerator.
Right.
They're renting everything. They own nothing.
Right.
So inflation hits them 100% with 0% of appreciation of anything they own because they don't own anything. So inflation is a huge tax on the poor. Inflation happens because more money gets distributed. They print money, that creates inflation because money represents all the goods and services that are available to the Americans. So when they print another dollar, the dollars in your pocket just went down in value. They will buy less. That's the reason they can't just print money. So they have three ways of getting money. They can print it, print new money. They can borrow it. So let's go. Printing new money definitely causes inflation, right? Now, unless it's to replace old bills that they burn, which they do that kind of thing. But making new money creates inflation. And then what do they do with that money they make? They distribute it to hopefully the poor, hopefully not the rich. Sometimes they distribute it to the rich in different ways, but hopefully they distribute it to the poor. The poor use it up in a New York second, and of course, then they put that in the system. They've increased demand, decreased supply, and increased cost of things. So the other thing is they borrow it. Well, when they borrow it, they enter the debt market, and the market says, okay, how much do I get for loaning $1 to the U.S. government? And the more they borrow, the more the U.S. government borrows, the higher that interest rate goes up. So now the base of all interest rates, the safest place you can loan money, put your money as a wealthy person or a wealthy country, whatever, is the United States. So now they are raising the bar by taking more debt. They're raising the bar of the base rate of interest. So let's say the government's borrowing money on 5 years at 4.3%. That means you and I can't borrow money at 4.3%, because what idiot would loan us money for the same rate as loaning it to the U.S. government, where it's 100% safe? I mean, there's very little chance I'm going to go broke. Very little chance you're going to go broke. We're very careful people. We think a lot through, right? But not as little chance as the U.S. government. And guaranteed, if the U.S. government goes broke, we're in a lot of trouble, right? So
whether we're broke or not won't matter very much.
So if the U.S. government's borrowing for 4.3%, we have to pay more than that. And what's that what they call spread? What's that going to be? Maybe 2%. So that means our rate's 6.3%. In the meantime, everybody's pretending that the Fed is controlling interest rates, which they are to a small degree. But what really controls the interest rates is how much money the government's paying in interest on loans that the government takes from the world, of the sheiks and the other countries and U.S. citizens and all the people have this extra money to loan that they want actually no risk at all. The U.S. government's sucking that up. So debt causes higher interest rates. Printing money causes higher inflation. So now the last thing is tax. So you tax, and that creates more money in the government and probably has a negative effect on inflation, and probably does not have a negative effect on interest rates. But the problem with tax is you're taking money from the people who have worked for it, and you're penalizing. Whether it's a tax on gasoline, you're penalizing buying gasoline. If it's a tax on income, you're penalizing making income. Secondly, when you take that money out of that person's pocket, that's money they're not reinvesting. Because remember, poor people buy stuff. So you take the tax from them, which they do tax the poor in a lot of ways. They buy stuff, so they're not going to buy stuff. They're going to give the money to the government, who's then going to give it to God knows where, God knows what. And wealthy, they don't spend it, they reinvest it. So this is investment money that is not going into the market to create jobs and create businesses and create inventions, et cetera. So all three things are bad. Printing money is bad, borrowing money is bad, and taxing people is bad. So why do we have to do it? We have to do it because the government spends. So what's really bad? Government spending is bad, especially government spending that's unnecessary or doesn't give us the return in happiness and convenience, et cetera, and safety. So when the U.S. government gets involved in things that it shouldn't be involved in, which is anything the states can handle, when the states get involved in anything they shouldn't be involved in, which is anything the counties and the cities can handle, they're wasting our money. And there's always been tax money wasted, and there always will be. But they need to work very hard. When you vote, when you get something you think, well, that's nice that I got it, but I probably shouldn't have gotten it from the government, or when something's available to you that you're like, well, that's nice, I'm going to take advantage of it, but it's probably dumb that they're offering this. They're causing all these problems by handing out money that either shouldn't be taxed, shouldn't be borrowed, or shouldn't be printed. Make any sense?
It makes a lot of sense, and it's happening everywhere, all the time, in all directions. Yep. And I think that's a bit of it, the overwhelming thing of any of these different topics we're looking at. It's all, there's a lot of it's just overwhelming. Mm-hmm. It's like there's so many different things you feel like you should be paying attention to, or you should know more about. And then at some level, I think you hit on this earlier. It's like, a lot of people just check out. They don't even I've tried to have conversations with people about different things just to see what they find important and why. And they either check out, they don't care. It's hard to say they don't care. But the other thing you touched on is like, well, they're indebted to a system. They're afraid to speak up or step out of line because it could impact their livelihood and their income, everything that surrounds them. And I think that's like the whole mechanism of COVID in that medical tyranny window was like, you have to take this or we're going to punish you. And then the government works with pharmaceutical companies to not directly harm people or violate people's constitutional rights, but they'll force mandates on businesses. Like if you have so many employees, then you have to push this particular thing, and that's unfair to everybody. It's like because they're pushing the responsibility onto you because it breaks the law if they do it, where they force you to do it, which should be breaking the law by forcing you to do it.
Well, it goes back to, there's one place I didn't go. I said the county, the state shouldn't do things that the county should do. The county shouldn't do things that people can do for themselves, that the families can do for themselves. And one of the geniuses in Trump, and this is not a Trump commercial, but one of the geniuses in Trump was when it came down to the rules about COVID, the distancing, the masks, all that stuff. He said, let the states handle it. And why would he say that? Well, the realities of New York and Florida, New York with all the people and Florida with all the elderly people are very different than the state of Indiana with 6 million people in the entire state. I mean, our population is about like Miami in our whole state. We're socially distanced. Yeah. You don't need Indiana's socially distanced.
This is about as close as we get. Right?
As close as we get. So Indiana has a different reality than other states. And then the intelligent governors said we're going to handle it by county, because obviously Gibson County doesn't need the same thing that Vanderburgh County needs, and Vanderburgh County doesn't need the same thing that Marion County needs.
Or whatever the county, Miami, Florida doesn't need whatever a neighboring county that's more rural and
exactly. There's counties in Florida that almost nobody lives in, that they grow tomatoes or strawberries or something. So,
or where the gators live, gators only.
Yeah, who knows? So and then the county to say, the county could say, okay, in your home, everyone in that home needs to be wearing a mask at all times. Well, none of us would have put up for that, right?
Well, they did in other countries. That was part of the reason why Americans started getting really edgy, was whenever they saw Canada doing it and all these different countries around the world doing it.
And there were people who made decisions for themselves that I probably wouldn't have made. Like I would see people driving down the road on a scooter with their mask on, and it was confusing. But
I still see stuff like that today.
Or a person driving in their car alone with their mask on. And maybe they're just trying to be convenient, or maybe they have allergies. Maybe there's some other reason. I don't know. But some people went to an extreme that I wouldn't have gone to. Other people didn't seem to see the need in any of it. And I'm not going to make a comment on that one way or the other. They had a thing where you could wear just a cloth over your face in an airplane, and then they decided, oh no, you have to wear a mask. I don't really know there was a big difference between the mask and the cloth. Maybe there was. I don't know.
Well, most of the science says now that it
didn't really do anything.
It didn't do anything.
Right.
And it wasn't going to do anything in the beginning. I mean, it was all conjecture.
So then you wonder if it was just a gag to try to make everybody feel like they were taking proactive action. Like, when we did the duck and cover drills when I was very young, I don't think a child diving underneath their school desk is really going to protect them from an atomic bomb. But maybe you're on the way outskirts. I don't know. But I mean, I'm not. But I don't
know if the science backs that one
like,
up.
We're doing something. At least we're doing something. And so yeah.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of what you're talking about is the social cueing part of it, and it's like when things get so scary and kind of out of control or whatever, people do tend to act. I mean, genetically, we act in crowds because you were protecting yourself by being a part of a larger group. And most people, if a chunk of the group is doing a thing, is not going to just go against that thing. They're going to kind of fall in line and do what the other thing, because it's comforting, and we're joining the team to try to fix this thing. Well, there was, I agree with some of that. There's some of that going on, and it made people maybe feel a little more comfortable for a while. But then there's the other side of it. It's like, what was there more to it?
Yeah.
Why was that really needed if that wasn't going to help? And we could find a way to comfort people in other ways than telling them to mask up if that wasn't helpful. But
indoctrinating people to an idea that they don't know best, they can't make decisions for themselves, they must do what they're ordered to do. That's a socialist or even communist indoctrination. And we do have communists who live in the United States of America. Like turning that temperature up to 80 degrees on the thermostat. Back in the 50s, they turned the temperature on communists up to 80 degrees. It was a little bit excessive when they were telling people who could act and who couldn't act and who could be in this and who couldn't be in this and what kind of movies you could make and what kind of movies you couldn't make. That was very wrong. But McCarthyism was wrong. But it doesn't change the fact that we had communists or have communists in the United States and always have, and sympathizers with other governments. Some are friendly to us and some aren't, and we always have. We've overreacted to that fear sometimes, but it doesn't mean that it's not real. And we have socialists and communists that are elected officials that are in our government who would like to see the world run that way. I don't, or the United States run that way. I don't know why you would, but I don't understand also why you would wear a mask in the car alone. So I don't always understand why people are the way that they are.
Well, I think do you ever listen to Tucker? I've asked you that. I don't know if you ever have or not.
Yeah.
I would, if you listen to that episode with G. Van Fleet, mm-hmm. I think it talks about the color guard, the color revolution. And it talks about, the people in China only heard what China wanted them to hear. They only had one narrative. They didn't hear anything that we were doing. I mean, they were very much on lockdown from whatever. It's propaganda all the time. Mm-hmm. And Xi talks about it, and I'm only circling back around to this because you talked about why we behave the way we behave, or why do communists want what they want. Many people that's fully support communism don't like capitalism. They believe, they believe in the oppressor and the oppressed, similar to Marxism. There's the oppressor and the oppressed. Mm-hmm. Mao was able to create divisions within his own country to pit people against each other so that he could then swoop back in and take ultimate power. I mean, he wanted absolute power, and that was the thing. And so the indoctrination happened where, like, they thought America was bad. They thought they were taught all these different things, and they were taught that Mao was the savior. He was basically instilled himself as God. That's a god.
The way you take power of someone is you let them feel, you create a situation where they feel threatened, and you create a situation where they feel you are the answer mm-hmm. to their problem.
Right.
And once you do that, then you have power over them. And parents do it every day with their kids.
Well, and
don't run out in the street.
Yeah.
Hold my hand in this parking lot. We have to hold hands
Yeah.
when we go across the street. You wait to go. That light has to be mm-hmm. green, and then you walk right next to me. And they do it to protect their child.
Yes,
not
100%.
Not to control their child. They're doing it to protect their child. But that's the way you take control of someone. What child doesn't look to their parent? Well, I guess there's some, but there's some really screwed up parents. What child doesn't look to their parent as their savior for the threats against them in the world? Almost every child does. Even some children who have parents that are not very good at saving them. Mm. But yeah, so that's the process, and that's what I feel like some people were leveraging with COVID was let's make these people feel very threatened, and let's be the savior, and let's gain a little power in the process.
Sure. Well, I tell you what, I know I don't know what your end time is here. We've talked for quite a bit, but I really feel like the next conversation, I didn't know that you would go down this path with talking about China at the level that you have, or indoctrination or communism, but those are subjects that I'm really fascinated by. And I feel like if you and I would agree, first of all, we might want to sit down again. Mm-hmm. Second of all, what I feel like I would like to do to flesh out this truth-seeking apparatus is, like, have you listened to a few things or kind of, understand how I understand things. I'd like to understand a little bit more how you understand things, and then we can come back and kind of advance the ball down the path a little bit. So like a truth seeking apparatus is, here's kind of why we are where we are. We think we kind of agree with where we are right here. Our goal is to improve, and to flourish more, and to make America the best version that it can be. And we can probably agree that it's probably not going, it hasn't been going so great, or you might say it's been going great. I don't know how do you even say that.
Hey, we all have food in the refrigerator. The heat's on. The air conditioning's on. We have a roof over our heads.
Yes,
we're driving around in cars.
For most people.
And you're never going to solve it for all people.
Right.
As Jesus said, the poor will always be among you.
Right.
But yeah, I think that things are going well. I think they could go better, and I don't think there's a time in history you couldn't have said that. But I think that things are going well. And I'm with you. It doesn't matter whether a Republican or Democrat is in charge. The main thing is that the right things are being taken to heart. People have a hard time understanding, well, how could they be a socialist or a communist? They're a senator, they're a congressman, they're a president. Well, you have to listen to what they say, and you have to listen to their doctrine, and you can't just say, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, I'm a libertarian. You have to, and therefore that guy's okay because he says he's what I am. You can't have quite that much trust. You have to really listen to what they're saying and what they're doing, and you have to look at what happens when they're in charge. And if I think it's interesting that when we go to hire someone, and everybody believes this is perfectly reasonable, we get a copy of their driver's license. We have them fill out an application which describes many, many things, including their background, which we look at very thoroughly and take very seriously. And then we run a credit check. We want to know that they have good credit, that they make good credit decisions for themselves, because not in every job, maybe if you wash cars, it's not as important. But if you're going to be a manager, it's extremely important. If you're going to be an accountant, it's super important that you can manage your own money, because managing other people's.
Sure.
And then we run a criminal background check. And if there are crimes, did this guy, get caught selling an ounce of marijuana when he was 18 and now he's 48 and he hasn't had a problem since? Or did he have a violence problem or a theft problem that's even more recent than that? And then you have to make a decision of whether you want to hire the guy. Mm-hmm. The information I just named, how much of that do you have when you go into that voting booth to vote for who's going to run your country, your state, your county, your city? None of it. I want to see.
I expected you to make me more comfortable in saying what you're getting ready to say. You did, that made it worse.
I want to see TransUnion scores on these guys. I want to see Empirica scores. I want to see what their credit is.
Yeah.
I want a criminal history on them.
Transparency.
I want more than a guy who just gets up and smiles with a lot of white teeth and a glint in his eye and tell me everything's going to be fine if you put me in charge.
Well, I think you started the conversation in a pretty good path, and we were talking about our childhoods and how things were different, and how we questioned everything, and we had kind of individual dissidence to authority in some ways, like you were going to question things, and to me, you talked about indoctrination, and I happen to be I'm an education major. I went to school to be a teacher and decided not to become a teacher because the bureaucracy was problematic to me, which would really surprise you, right? But one of the things, I have paid close attention to what our system. We've chosen to send our kid to private school because we believe in the morals and values that are supported there, as opposed to what I feel is more indoctrination. And the reality of it is, Mike, is you and I, we were more free range kids, right? And you said it in a different way, but like we were trusted to go outside and play and make. You had to make how many decisions per day when you were out there on your own? Yeah,
just to stay alive.
How did you even come back alive any given day? Well, today it seems like we're taught more and more authority. Like you're always subservient to kind of something, and we're also put into more categories. Like we fought for 60, 70 years to get out of segregation, and it seems like today we're putting ourselves back in walls and race, color, sex, creed. Like everybody's got their own identity, individual identity, and that comes first versus their ability to take in a problem, use common sense, and solve it together, regardless of any of that other stuff. Like we've kind of gone full circle, and it's hard to imagine how we've just gotten there naturally. Like how did we go so off the rails? And this is another thing topically from China is, I believe our education system has been influenced by communism at a very, very high level, meaning it scared the crap out of me 30 years ago or so. I don't remember, but a lot of the people that were running for office or that were in cabinets, that were in administrations, it turns out a lot of them ended up in institutions, from government institutions to public institutions to higher education institutions, full communist morals and values, to the point where they looked to Mao and how Mao did what he did with the Cultural Revolution and openly thought he was a good person who did some good things for China.
Correct.
And so those are the people now that have inserted themselves into decision-making areas.
It's not wrong for an American to have communist views or for an American to be a socialist. There's nothing wrong with that because we allow those freedoms.
Yeah.
It's a problem when those people are put in authority over other people and they believe everybody has to believe what they believe.
100%.
It's just like there's nothing wrong with being a Muslim in America,
No.
or being Jewish or Catholic or being Protestant or evangelist, whatever you are, Mormon, whatever. It's not a problem until you say everyone in America should believe what I believe. Everybody in America should worship what I worship, or should do what I do. Then it becomes an issue.
And if you don't, you're punished in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, punished and rewarded. Yeah, punishment and reward, because that's how you get people to do what you want them to do.
Right.
But I think it's interesting because all children are really raised, definitely until they're 12 or 13, I think, or hit puberty or so, in a communist dictator environment. I mean, they go home and their parent or parents or guardians are their dictators. Mm-hmm. They go to school and their teachers and the staff are their dictators. They don't really get to make very many decisions on their own. And what will a whole lot of kids tell you? What do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a policeman. I want to be a teacher. I want to be a principal. I want to be, what they're telling you is, I want to be in charge. I want to be the one who makes the rules.
Right.
That's what they're really telling you, right?
Yeah.
Because they're emulating these people who in their lives all have authority. Mm-hmm. Some people say, I want to be a mommy. I want to be a daddy. They're really, how many of them end up being, well, mommies and daddies, sure, but those other careers, they don't. But as children, they idolize those careers because those are the people that they see as in charge, and they want to be in charge.
Oh, man, we could actually talk for 2 more hours right now on this, because this, I think, to me, just now, this is kind of where we are and the decisions that we have to be. I mean, you've got grandkids, you've got more coming soon. Congratulations on that. And we know there's got to be some switch that flips. And like, yes, you can have communist beliefs and socialist beliefs, and we should be able to have open debates and conversations about that. Yeah. And it should be okay to have conversations with people that don't agree with you and don't like capitalism and don't. I will talk to anyone.
Yeah.
I will talk to anyone.
Right.
However, if we don't train our citizenry and our kids to be defiant at some level and to question things, think critically, and to look at things and say, why do I feel that? Why do I believe this? What really makes me want this next thing? At some point they can determine, geez, I really wanted to be a tyrant. I really wanted to have that control and power because I thought that control and power was going to give me something, or what is it that I really want? What are we trying to accomplish here? And I think,
what was the song in the 80s, right? Everyone wants to rule the world.
Tears for Fears. And
Exactly.
I love that song. I love that song. And I feel like, this is the real conversation, no matter what you're talking about, is the kids are our future. And I'm talking to a lot of people about artificial intelligence and technology and all this stuff. And what most people don't really understand, and why I feel like AI is kind of going to be an up and coming real problem, is you've got developers and people that create softwares and hack and do all these different things that are teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
And you put them in positions of power in places like Google and all these search engines who really do control the flow of information at all levels.
Yeah.
And they still might be full communist. And they've never worked themselves out or had a conversation as to why that's good, bad, or what flaws does communism have. We can all look at capitalism and it's got flaws. There's people that take advantage of it and screw things up along the way. All day long, I'll argue about that. We've also talked about monopolies and how they get to where they are and how that causes problems. But I don't really feel like right now, I've talked to people about the real need for true civics class that's required for all students, like a teaching of.
But then who's teaching it? Well, how are they teaching it? What are they saying?
To me, so to me again, so just think of it like this, and we can leave it here. We can keep going because again, I'm so fascinated by this part. The truth-seeking apparatus to me is something that basically is controlled by a society, and the society can be a local society. It can be a group of people who say, I only want to listen to the people that got things mostly right when it came to the COVID pandemic, because I want to make the best decision for the health and safety of my family, and these are the people that I trust. Mm-hmm. I'm going to rule out all these other people who lied to me, or I felt like they lied to me, or maybe they just didn't even say what I wanted to hear. I have the freedom to make those choices, right? Same thing with education. If we can get, say, a vast majority of parents in any given local community to state controls education curriculum largely. The federal government controls curriculum in a lot of ways.
You say that, but when I was a kid, my parents sent me to public school.
Oh, it's way different. I went to public school too.
My parents were Catholic.
Mine weren't.
So because we didn't go to Catholic school, we had to go to CCD classes. Now, I wish I could remember what CCD stood for, but it was religion classes.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And they didn't have anything to do with school. We went to our Catholic church for these classes. I don't remember, once a week, twice a week.
Okay.
It was. And,
it was like a field trip that wasn't part of the curriculum or the school.
It wasn't part of school at all. So,
but you were just being exposed to it.
Is that we could have civics classes that were separate, that were run by volunteers, et cetera. But then it's a very short jump from that to the civics classes teaching capitalism or teaching socialism or teaching communism, or teaching some
new form,
kind of something or other.
Yeah.
So I mean that's dangerous also. I mean, no matter what, when you unleash somebody other than the parents on the kids to shape the kids' minds, the parents may not get out of that what they really want.
Well, I think for me, it's the apparatus is owned by all people, and the parents need to have keys to it and access to it. It's transparent.
It's the parents educating themselves, and then educating their kids in the home, whether you're talking about religion, or politics, or anything else. The parents, I believe, we have a catastrophe in the United States with the number of single parent households where the children are not being paid attention to.
Fatherless homes have all the bad statistics you could ever want to draw to them, for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm not saying that a single mom can't raise a kid, or a single dad can't raise a kid, or a grandparent can't raise a kid, but it's not necessarily optimal.
Well, the data shows. Well, the data shows
maybe optimal because of who the other parent is.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things, but the data is absolutely clear. Like, single parent families create problems in outcomes generally. Now, like you said, there could be wonderful
in
single
general.
Yeah, single parent person may do fantastic. Kids might come out perfect, but
So how do our public policies support parents staying together?
Oh, you really want to get into this?
Well, there's a marriage penalty in your taxes.
They're rewarded for having children out of wedlock.
There's so many rewards out there that we're giving through our political system for misbehavior that's having a very bad effect on the children that are raised. So if we change those to incentivize staying together, if we change those to incentivize having children and sticking together and aiding people in sticking together, I think we would see benefits from that, even if it was marginal, how it improved relationships and families staying together. I think that we would see great benefits to that.
Oh, I agree. I mean, foundationally, it's hard to argue that that's not the case. If someone's willing to come and have a conversation and debate or whatever, that's saying, explain to me how a single family home is really largely a benefit. Now, we understand there are going to be cases where it's going to have to happen. You've got a bad father, you got a bad mother,
right?
And you're in between spouses. I mean, you can't force someone to have
things happen. People become ill.
Yeah.
People become mentally ill. People.
I mean,
there are people who become dangerous.
Yeah.
Who weren't dangerous in the beginning, but they have something go wrong.
Yeah. And we want compassion. We want to be compassionate for that.
But my question is, do families feel supported? I don't think that they necessarily do feel supported. I think they feel quite the opposite in many cases.
Well, I mean, I feel like families are much like us as individuals, where we feel we're kind of it's become anti-family. I mean, it really is. Society has become more secular. It's become more individual, me, instead of what it used to be. Like when we grew up, it was my family all lived kind of close together well, one side of the family lived really close. Like my family owned a farm, and like I had an uncle, and grandmother lived right here, and we.
Well, what do you hear your friends saying?
Yeah.
What do you hear your friends saying? Oh, Tommy, he's doing great. Yeah, he just graduated, and he's moving to Chicago to make his life. And Susie, she's doing great. She's moving to L.A. Mm-hmm. The family's all moving out to different locations, and then they're alone. And then when they have these kids, they don't have grandma to watch the kids when they need to. They don't have their old family doctor to say, well, I'm retired, but this is the guy I recommend. They don't have these social inputs anymore. And I, living in Evansville, we have a very different experience.
Yeah.
So,
well, a lot of people move back here ultimately, and I'm one of those. My wife and I moved to Asheville, North Carolina for a window of time, and and she's from Seattle, Washington, and went to school in Oregon and went to school in Arizona. And when we first got married, we were trying to make our decision on where we were going to be, but it just so happened she got offered a internship here locally, and she wowed them so well that she got offered a job even before she graduated from law school. And at the time when we were making that decision, one of the biggest law firms on the West Coast imploded. Because we were talking about potentially moving out there. The cost of living is much higher. We had other things to consider, right? She's like, well, I'll just come to Evansville, but we will only live in Evansville for 5 years, and we are leaving. Because at the time when you come into Evansville and places like Evansville as an outsider, it's kind of like for us, I don't know what side of town you're from, but if you go to the west side, certain places you walk into, people are like, who are you? I don't know you. It's like you're kind of that outsider syndrome. Well, my wife, when she came into town, this is a lesson I would give to anyone. She got in, she put herself on any and every board that she could get a part of. She got highly involved. Yeah. I used to feel like I knew everybody in town or had a few degrees of separation from everybody in town. If I wanted to talk to you, I could probably talk to two other people that I knew, and I'm like, hey, I want to talk to Mike. Yeah, I can give you his phone number. I got it in my Rolodex here, but that quickly changed. Yeah. And she's like, everyone knows her, and I'm like, just this.
Well, I knew her before I knew you.
Yeah. But so when we ended up leaving Asheville because of a job situation she had, and she's like, okay, well, now I'm ready to move back home. And I'm like, okay, I guess, how are we going to move to Seattle? She's like, no, we're going to Evansville. Yeah. Evansville's home.
Right.
And she had all of her reasons why, it became home to her. But I think a lot of it is the things that you said. It's the connection with the people around you.
Right.
And
you need those social connections. And those are very hard to get in the urban atmosphere with people moving in and out and moving all around. Yeah. It's funny. I do a lot of business with Ford Motor Company. And a lot of the people who work for Ford, and especially historically, not as much right now, but would move from city to city to city. Well, their social connections became with the other Ford employees. Sure. And so when they arrived in a new city, there was somebody there that they had met earlier in their career. And so they felt at home because of this family, this social networking with the other Ford employees. And so that's kind of been neat to see. And I realize those things exist. I'm not casting judgment on people who decide not to stay where they grew up. But I am saying that it adds complication to life. Parents without children anywhere nearby as they get older, children without parents when they have kids to help take care of the kids, and losing these social relationships. And I think it's a problem for America, really, overall. I think it is. And then people being so proud of the fact that they moved away and did something on their own, and less proud of staying home and continuing with what's been built by their family in that location up to then, I think is a little silly. A little silly.
Well, I mean, that's a real man. That's a big issue. And so, part of the family dynamic is you have, not a broken family. That's a good start, right? And then you figure out a way to make it to where your kids potentially want to stay nearby. How do you do that? What are the, what's the handbook look to get to something like that? Because I ended up staying in town. I never really envisioned myself. I got offered. I got into IU. I got into. My mom lived in Florida. I got into University of Florida. I could have gone to either one. Mm-hmm. And I just, at that point in my life, I didn't really have a vision for what I wanted to do, and I wasn't a partier, so I didn't just want to go to IU to become a frat guy and go to a party. I was like, no, I want to figure out what I want to do, and then maybe I go down a path. So, but I mean, I guess how do you unwind that clock? It's like I feel like things are becoming more. It feels like kids are more apt to come back home now than maybe they were 5 or 10 years ago. And I don't know if that's just because of the state of the world around us, but I really feel like there is more of a magnet.
Well, it's always been a thing, here in Evansville, that kids would go away to school, move to a big city, say Chicago, St. Louis, Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Nashville, whatever. And then they would find somebody, they'd get married, and then all of a sudden they realize, I can make just as much money in Evansville, Indiana, and live on half as much. And now that I've got a kid or two, that would be very, very convenient because I can't afford anything where I am.
And built-in babysitting is good.
They start applying for jobs and they move home. Yeah. And that's what happened to my sister. She went to Vanderbilt, and then she went to Dallas, and then they had their first child, and then they moved to Evansville. I moved to Evansville right after college, and my wife moved here from Cleveland because we met in college in Dallas. But several people, my brother included, and my sister, it's kind of, they start showing up again when they're about 30, Yeah. And
which is good.
I'm not against all the moving around stuff. I'm just saying that America has really lost something. And has lost a lot of the family values, and it's a lot harder to decide to do something inappropriate and make different decisions that negatively affects your family when your larger family is standing around watching. We know what you're up to. You're going to quit doing that, kind of thing. And
that is true. Yeah. That's true. I never thought of that.
Yeah,
kind of the built-in. Authoritarian piece of the family. It's like they're looking out for you, but also keeping you in check. Yeah, and looking out for each other, 100%.
Yeah, and we've lost that as a nation, and I think we lost a lot in losing that. And people have lost their way very easily, also.
So the challenge is how do you get it back without something really, really significantly bad happened? Because usually that's what happens with, you got ebbs and flow in society, and that's what happens. Like something big happens, catastrophic, and everything kind of shrinks again.
I think it's just not encouraging it. I think that with people, what I was saying earlier is I don't understand the pride in, my daughter's doing great. Okay. She lives in Nashville now. She lives in LA now, and she's doing these exciting things. And
I think I know. I
You know what
understand where you're
It's
going
just,
now.
Why?
What's
is that
the
a big
thing
deal?
out
Who
there?
cares?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what's the thing out there that's not here?
Yeah.
And then I guess the LA mom is saying, "Oh yeah, my daughter's doing great. She lives in New York." And the New York mom said, "Oh yeah, my daughter's doing great. She lives in Washington." You know, what's the point with all? I get some of it, professionally, trying to seek out things that you can't get at home.
Well, and if you don't like your family at all, you have
You
no
don't like your
connection.
family at all, or you feel no connection to your family. There's people in those situations.
Yeah.
So I'm not demonizing it.
Yeah.
I think it's fine. I just think staying in your hometown is fine too.
Oh, yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
And I that is indoctrination from home.
Yeah.
A lot is because you want to create an environment where you want your kids to want to come back at some point.
Yeah.
I, for one, I've never quite thought about it that way, but it's like you want to push them away enough to make them independent. And I think for me and you, we didn't have that problem because we were independent. We would wake up if
we were encouraged to not be very dependent.
Yeah, if her mom gave us a bowl of oatmeal or cereal, that was it. And they're like, she either went to work or not, and away you went.
Yeah.
So you were,
we got up, made our own breakfast.
Yeah, mostly.
Made our way to school.
Yeah.
And my older brothers and sisters were in charge of making sure I got there. And we didn't. Yeah, there wasn't there was no helicopter.
No, no, because I think the extended family took on those roles naturally.
Yeah.
And so there's also the thing where we've gone from a society that had multiple kids, and now it's like
I was one of 5.
If you have 2, that's probably normal. The natural, a lot of only had 1,
which
but
is
you don't have
reaping havoc.
Yeah, you don't have that built
in because we're not replacing ourselves, so we're being replaced with people coming in right now illegally.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, as opposed to legally, where they can be screened and where we're getting people that actually are of use to our country, as opposed to maybe some of them will be of use, some of them will be troublemakers. It's just haphazard who comes,
and we have no idea who they are.
No idea. Some are
where they're going.
Some are coming to create trouble, who will ultimately decide that they're better off not creating trouble. Their lives will be better, even though they came to create trouble.
Yeah.
If they break away from those groups and they go and lead a good life, and then they'll have a great story one day of, when I came over, I was some kind of involved with some terrible gang, and I broke away from them, and now I'm successful. Other people come with the best intentions, but they find life very hard, getting ahead very hard, and they end up doing bad things in order to solve immediate problems, which of course will create terrible long-term repercussions like jail, death, etc. And so they don't even know who they are when they're coming over the border. It would be my thought.
I'm paying attention to this a lot. God, I love how we're bouncing around. It's kind of all over the place on topics, but it really, you really look at it all. It all is together. And so,
and of course, these kids coming over the border, it goes right back to what I was saying. They've lost all of their family tradition, all their family heritage, all their social network, and
we don't have a plan to absorb them and make them a part of our society. They're kind of here on their own.
They're just here, yeah.
And so this circles right back around, because you talked about immigration, illegal as it is. We're not controlling it at all. We have no idea where any of these people are going, whether they're friendly or foe.
They don't have jobs.
They don't have jobs. Well, worse than that.
Yeah.
From what I understand, and I haven't heard anyone that's arguing to this point, we are funding and housing and giving medical supply to a lot of these people that come across the border. They're being bussed in, shipped to certain areas, given debit cards, given health, all these different things that a lot of people in our community in our society isn't giving. So, like, for me, we are lacking a positive vision for our future. Mm-hmm. Like our kids, if we want them to have less mental health issues, which it's staggering. Mm-hmm. They kept our kids home for 2 years. It killed development for 2 years of the brain and the social interactions and all that stuff. Then our kids, and even kids of minorities, mm-hmm. they see these people coming across the border and being handed things and given things, and it's like.
But at the end of the day, we're a giving nation.
Well, yeah.
People in America generally are going to stop and help.
Yeah. I love our country.
So the idea
100%
that
agree.
these people come across, they need medical attention, they need food, they need shelter. The idea that people give them those things doesn't shock me.
No.
The question is, are they coming here 100% to receive these things and not to make a positive impact?
I think a fair portion definitely are. I think a fair portion of them are coming here for opportunity.
We need people who say, who have a job lined up, who have a way to live lined up, and then we got to put the bar on the door, because once they're inside, we're a soft touch. We are. We're easy. We're going to take care of them one way or another.
Yeah.
Even if we send them home, we're going to take care of them in the meantime.
Yeah. 100%. Well, I mean, that's. I feel seriously we could go down any rabbit hole here and talk for much longer.
We should get going.
We should get going. Yeah, I know. You probably talk longer than you expect.
Yeah.
I want to. What a robust conversation and an interesting
lovely.
conversation. I would love to do it again. I'd love to maybe pick a couple topics that we maybe touched on. Whenever you're. I mean, there's no calendar like do it regularly, but anytime you want to come back and hit on I really love your experience in the world, your wisdom that you bring. You bring a different viewpoint than I bring. You're paying attention to different things that I pay attention to. And I think these conversations can help other people have conversations about things they might not agree with or some slight disagreement. But at the end of the day, it's pretty safe to say we're both here for the same reason. And we both want a better America. We both want our kids and our grandkids to have what we felt like we had when we were kids. We want that to be brought back, and for me, it's like having conversations like this can maybe move us in that direction a little more.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate your time. If you have any contact information, anybody ever wants to get a hold of you, you're probably not in that window, but we can put it in the show notes if anybody wants to get a hold of you on Twitter or whatever things you might be on. Might not be on any of those things, nor care to have any of that. But Mike, I appreciate your time so much.
Thank you. Nice talking to you.
Good talking to you as well.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.